It was a cool, crisp day in late July when three brave explorers set out in search of Ithaca, known today as Long Island. Those explorers were Katrina, Adriana, and Jeremias. They packed the canoe with food, water, tools, and weapons to conquer the predators of the mysterious island. When the canoe was packed and ready to go, the three explorers began their journey across the Aegean Sea, known today as Walapa Bay. The wind was fierce and the waves were high. It took all the strength that the explorers had to conquer the mighty sea, which was so angry it seemed that Poseidon himself had unleashed a curse against the explorers. However, the trio soon prevailed and landed safely at the island. After staking out the best place to spend the night, a fire of curiosity began to kindle in the minds of the adventurers, and the desire to explore the island's riches was too great to ignore. So Katrina, Adriana, and Jeremias ventured into the forest. As they walked, they beheld the mighty power of the massive trees around. Then, out of nowhere, the mighty Skulla tree attacked the group. Its branches reached down, picking them clear off the ground, trying to consume them. With great strength, they managed to fight it off. However, Katrina and Adriana were terrified when they saw that Jeremias had been infected by the tree, contracting a deadly disease that made his hair turn to seaweed. The only cure for the disease was in the bark extract of the giant cedar tree, so the group set out to find a grove of cedars before it was too late. They walked along the shore, but all they could find was giant driftwood. The bark would be useless as an antidote, since it had been contaminated by seawater. However, the explorers' luck soon changed. They found the entrance to a giant cedar grove. It was a gift from Harius Boncarius, the god of the cedar trees. It was difficult to see in the darkness of the forest, but the trio strolled through, finding many trees, but not what they needed. The bark extract was not potent as a cure for the seaweed disease until it began to rot. Miraculously, light began to shine in from the canopy. The explorers found what they needed at last, a giant cedar stump. The stump was scaled, the bark extracted, and Jeremias was cured. It was a huge victory for the explorers. When the noble trio returned to their camp, they found their food had been stolen by raccoons, so they had to scavenge for something to eat. They could find only raw oysters. The oysters were eaten, and camp was set up. The tide began to recede, and the three knew they would be confined to the island until tomorrow afternoon. As night began to fall, the heroes began to prepare for sleep. Their shoes were hung in the trees to dry. A fire was built to keep them warm. The food they had left was hung in a tree to prevent the wild beasts of the island from eating it. As the sun set on the island, the three could swear they heard singing coming from the pinnacle rock in the distance, like sirens lulling them to sleep. The next morning, the tide began to come in, and the supplies were packed in bags to travel back home. Genelope and Celia Munchus were waiting. By the time the tide had risen all the way, the boat was completely packed, and our explorers headed off. The sky was gray, but the water was much calmer than it had been on their journey to the island. An enormous cheer rose from the canoe when the point of no return was spotted. This meant they were close to home. Fear shook through them when they saw the massive skeletons of dinosaurs on the shore. They knew that the creatures who preyed on these giants could be near them at this point. Luckily, they found a shortcut to home through the safety of a shallow lagoon. At last, Katrina, Adriana, and Jeremias had completed their odyssey.
I listen to the wind of my soul. Where I'll end up, well, I think